how many of you here, raise your hand, were not able to date in middle school or high school? I'm not looking at this group because this is my high schoolers over here. So I know what they're going to be saying. Okay. Raise your hand high. Be proud. Be proud. All right. How many of you are still currently being banned from dating right now? Oh my gosh, so much more hands are going up. Is that by choice or like because of your parents? Okay. So if you're like me, I grew up, my dad's a pastor, and we're an immigrant family coming from Vietnam back in 2014. And so I grew up in the States, and I wasn't really allowed to date, mainly because we live in a really ghetto area, so my parents were most likely scared that I was dating random people. But most of the time when I asked them, Mom, Dad, like, why can't I, go out on this, date with this girl? And they're like, well, you're not old enough to do that. And so for the most part of middle school and high school, I either didn't date or I, sneak around and try to, talk to girls. And so one of the things that I would do, and I remember this explicitly because it was a horrible disaster, because I tried to set up a triple date with somebody. So me, another girl, and four of our other friends were trying to get a date together, but all of us had, the same strict parents. We weren't allowed to date, and so we're like, okay, why don't we just create this huge group hangout that we can give an excuse to our parents, and so we're gonna go and watch a movie, but then eventually we're gonna split off and, try to have a little date. And so the plan was going smooth and well, until my dad had the great idea of bringing my siblings to the movie. And so, luckily he wasn't in the movie theater, but, he was the one right next door. I think they were watching Minions at the time that this came out. And so, I was like, okay, that's fine. I will hang out with this girl and, our friends, and we'll split off. And then after the movie, my dad's and my siblings' movie were still going on, but, me and my friend's movie finished early, so we left, and I was like, yes. I got some alone time. Oh, Esther's not here yet, so she doesn't know this, so tell her that later. But eventually, we talked to, oh, you right there. Oh, I'm so sorry. You should know this, though. I don't know if I told you. Anyways, so we actually went out, and, things got a little spicy. We just started hugging. And so all of a sudden, I got a phone call. Hello? Jason? Yes, Dad? Turn around. And so I turned around, and my dad was just standing there with my siblings in his hand. And I vividly remember my sister, Junia, who had her hand like this. And so, that was pretty much, ruined dating for me for the rest of high school. I never wanted to date another girl again, never really did anything until college. And, throughout college, I also tried to date, and it wasn't successful until Esther. But and I remember going home in spring break for the first time in college. I go to Biola, and I remember talking to my dad. And I said, Dad, I've been doing this, doing that, experiencing God. And he turns to me and he's like, so when am I going to have a grandchild? Where's your wife? And I was like, Dad, I'm 19. I'm like, I'm not, I never dated a girl successfully. Actually, I never even got the girl to agreed, maybe. I think at that time I didn't even get a girl to agree to go on a date with me. How do you expect me to do that? And so what I suspect that most of you did is you grew up, middle school, high school, pretty much didn't know how to date. Some of you even were banned to date in college, right? And so you didn't get to date at all. And then all of a sudden you went into your real life and you're like, ooh, okay, now I gotta date someone. Now I gotta get married. Now I got to settle down, find someone. And you sit there and you're like, okay, so how do I do that? And so it's in today's discussion that we'll be talking about. Because a lot of us, if we don't learn how to date, we ended up dating around, we ended up dating without purpose, and a lot of us tends to get hurt. And so as a church, we believe that dating and intimacy and marriage is important to our community. We believe that as a church, we have the responsibility of informing you what the Bible teaches about dating, about marriage, and especially about intimacy. And so in our book today, I want you to see how the story of two strangers goes from, two people who kind of know each other into dating, and then they go on a first date, and then they went public, and then they got married. And so I want us to see how does that progression start? How do you date, and how do you do it well enough that you can call it Christian dating? And so today, I want you to see that if God is really calling you into marriage, then you are ought to date, and you are ought to date properly. And so would you open up your Bibles to Song of Songs, chapter 1, verse 1. And so if you don't have a Bible, you can grab one in the pews right here. Our host church lovingly supplies us with a bunch of Bibles, so you can take them. But the page for that would be 547. Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 1. And again, if you don't have a Bible, there should be Bibles in the pews that you can just grab. And that would be page 547. All right. Solomon's Song of Songs. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth. For your love is more delightful than wine. Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes. Your name is like perfume poured out. No wonder the young women love you. Take me away with you, let us hurry. Let the king bring me into his chambers. We rejoice and delight in you. We will praise your love more than wine. Now, how many of you read that and goes, what the heck is going on? Oh yeah, I know you guys have been reading that. Okay. And so, if you're like me, like you're reading the book of Ecclesiastes and you're like looking over and you're like, what is going on over there? And if any of you are trying to read through the Bible, as we do at church, you're trying to read through the Bible every single year, you come to this book and you're like, how does one come up with this? Like, how does one introduce a story like this? Because, every other book in the Bible, you started with this city, or like in the days the kings were like this, or like that, at least give you some kind of introduction. It literally says, let him kiss me. And so how does one see that? And so the first thing I want us to see is that the author here is not trying to give us a linear story. He's not trying to give us, like, here's the beginning of the story, here's the middle, and here's the end. No, this is not like, your Netflix rom-com where you have two people starting. No, it's a conversation that is ongoing where a couple is sitting down and you get to know them and they're retelling the story to you. And so in this first 4 verses, we can see that this is first a marriage. Like if you read this portion, you're like, okay, that's super explicit. That's kind of sexual, but that's exactly how it's intended to be. Because at the beginning of this book, the author is trying to give us a vision for what a dating relationship, eventually will end up like. This is a vision for marriage. And so if any one of you is trying to date, the author is saying, here is what you need to look at before you even start dating. And so as you're going in deeper and deeper into this passage, you can see that first of all, in verse 2, it says, let him kiss me. So that's the physical intimacy. So this is perspective from the woman. And she says, let him kiss me, for your love is more intoxicating than wine. Your love is greater impact to my body than wine or alcohol can do. And then eventually, she even says in verse 3, pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes. Your name is like perfume poured out. She's not saying, hey, this guy is just handsome. This guy is sexy. She's not just saying that. She's just saying, hey, this guy is not only handsome and sexy, he's a good guy. Like, people actually like him, And he's saying that his name, his reputation, his honor is going around, and he's like, okay, this person is great. Like, this guy is actually a good guy. And then she even says, no wonder the other young women like you, right? And so this is not just a simple guy, who she just picked up off the street. This is a guy that everybody loves. And so there's 2 portions to this. First of all, she loves him intimately, and then she loves him character. She loves his character as well. And so lastly, it ends with a super explicit in verse 4, take me away with you, let us hurry, let the king, so in this case, the guy, brings me into his chambers. You read that correctly. This is a picture of going to sex, all right? And so here's how it's gonna work. The vision of dating includes 2 main parts, all right? Most of us focus on the first part, which is the commitment, right? Most of us think that if we're going to date, we're going to get engaged, and then we're going to get married. And then we're going to live forever and ever and ever. And so most of us think that, okay, marriage is simply just putting a ring on it and living together forever and ever. But the author is saying something different. This is not simply a vision of marriage, of forced commitment together. Like you're not just living together forcefully, but you're living together in a joy. And so what does it mean? It means that even though after years and years of marriage, you will still enjoy each other physically, characterally, and emotionally. Like this is a vision of marriage in which the author is saying, if you don't have this, don't even start dating. Like don't even begin to date, because this is exactly what we're trying to show you. And so I think this is important because I remember there was this one time, me and Esther were sitting down and talking to our youth students here. And, I think we just got engaged. And so all the students are like staring around us, and they look at Esther's ring and they say, how did you even get there? Like, how did you get Esther, like doing all those things? And I thought in my head, I was like, nobody asks how Esther gets Jason, but everybody asks how Jason gets Esther. So as I was like, you know what, that's fine. Like, that's fine. But the goal is that they know the end of the story. And so as we are sitting here, as we keep reading this story, I want us to see that this is the goal to marriage. Like this is exactly where we're trying to go. We're not just trying to be locked in with another person. We're not trying to just be, committed and be imprisoned with somebody for the rest of our life. No, we're trying to have a lifelong romantic relationship with someone. And so I think this is a first important point, because before we even date, right, if some of you might not even understand that the need for a vision is so important in a relationship, because it will absolutely guide you on who you would pick. Before the story even starts, the author is saying, hey, this guy, I picked him for a reason. I picked this guy, and the guy picked me because we would go into a relationship that is fruitful, that is loving, and it is not a chore to live together. Because have you ever met somebody who, even though they've been married for years after years after years, they still go and get boba together as if it's their first date? Like, have you ever met somebody that even though they have 5 kids, they still treat each other as if they're college sweethearts? And so this is the vision in which the author is trying to give us. And so now that we understand the vision, now that we kind of say, okay, like I know where we're trying to go, like how do I do that though? Like how do I even pick the person that would eventually get me there? And so the author continues on in this story, starting in they begin at the end of verse 4, where it said, the friends are saying, we rejoice and delight in you. We will praise your love more than wine. So affirming what, the author has been saying. But all of a sudden, the story changes. The story switches. And it says, down in verse 5, dark am I, yet lovely. So remember, this is beginning of the story where they barely know each other. And so she's saying, dark am I, yet lovely, daughters of Jerusalem, dark like the tents of Kedar, like the tents of Solomon. Do not stare at me, because I am dark, because I am darkened by the sun. My mother's sons were angry with me and made me take care of the vineyards. My own vineyards I had to neglect. Tell me, you whom I love, where you graze your flock and where you rest your sheep at midday. Why should I be like a veiled woman beside the flocks of your friends? Here we can see that the beginning of their relationship, it doesn't start off well. It starts with the woman being insecure. And I know some of your men are thinking, oof, I'm not the only one. And now, at the beginning of the story, we can see that she's insecure, she's doubting herself, she's being darkened by the sun, so she's working in her vineyard, she's a hard worker, and eventually when you reach to the end of verse 6, it says, my mother's sons were angry with me because my own they made me take care of the vineyards, but my own vineyard I had to neglect. So in working, toiling in the vineyards, she neglected her own body as a result. So the word vineyard here has a double meaning. And so the second point I want us to see, that when you date, when you have an opportunity to date, that you have an opportunity to restore somebody. That there is an opportunity for each and one of us to help the other person realize that there is something beautiful about them, that there is something Christ-like about them that they need to continue going. And so how does the author show us this, you might ask? So if you keep reading, now that the girls stop talking, the guy starts to jump into the scene. And so in verse 8, the friends, they're talking, so they come in and out. If you do not know woman, most beautiful of women, follow the tracks of the sheep and graze your young goats by the tents of the shepherds. And now the guy starts to talk. Like this is the first time he's like talking. And the first thing that he comes to say is, I liken you, my darling, to a mare among Pharaoh's chariots. And now if you're like me and you compare your significant other to a horse, I'm not sure how that's going to play out. I don't know if anybody of us compares our significant other to an animal, but this is the kind of imagery that is really unique to the Song of Songs. This is something that the Song of Songs continually use as imagery of love. So he's saying, you are so beautiful that even the best horse, that is the only description I can describe you. And so a Pharaoh's chariot horse was something that was so pretty, it was the most beautiful horse in the entire chariot, that the Pharaoh would personally crown that horse with jewels. It's not because the jewels made the horse pretty, but it was because the horse that complemented the jewels. So he's saying, hey, your body's fine. You're lovely. And so he's complimenting her. He's saying, hey, here is how I want you to think about yourself. You're not just some random girl. As you can see, right, he's trying to say, hey, I want to date you, but here's how you should look at yourself. And so throughout the process of dating, you can also see this once again in beginning of chapter 1, where she says, I am a rose of Sharon, a lily of the valleys. And then that's, most of us would, read that as a, pretty description. Most of us would read that as okay, that's just a description for herself. But this is, most commentators I've read actually don't think about it like that. What she is saying is that I am just a common flower on the field. So in Israel, there are valleys and valleys of lilies. And so because they don't clear it out for roads like we do today, there's plenty of it in their world. So she's saying, I am just a common flower. I am just a common girl among hundreds of women. And so she's saying, why do you want to pick me? And so, but see, what does he say? He say, like a lily among thorns is my darling among the young women. What he's saying is you're not just some random flower on the road. You're the only one I see. And so in that sense, I think the author is trying to tell us is that there is something special about dating that carries on into your marriage life. There's something special about telling the other person, hey, you are not just this random person that I'm trying to get. You're not just somebody that I picked off the road and trying to get married and you're trying to have kids. No, you're somebody that I choose and I adore you a lot. And so in this way, you can restore somebody else's relationship to themselves in your dating relationship. And so what does this look like? This looks like, some of you are incredibly insecure about your own body. And so when we date, that absolutely comes out. And then some of you are even more worried that you're not able to pay for somebody's date. So that also comes out when you're dating. And some of you are insecure about your parental relationship. Some of you are insecure about more money. Some of you are insecure about where you come from. Some of you are insecure about your school. Whatever it is, it will come out in your dating relationship. And one of the things that dating is so beautiful in this book is that you're able to restore the other person. Now, let me make a qualifier, because not everything, right, is your partner's responsibility, right? My own sin is not Esther's fault to fix, right? But her sin is mine to fix, though. That's the relationship. But anyways, in our relationship in between one another, we're allowed to restore each other, but that doesn't mean we get to lie to one another, right? We don't need to, we don't need to tell the other person hey, you're the most beautiful person in the world. That's totally not true. But you can say, hey, I think you're one of the most pretty women I have seen, and I get to love you in that way. And so look at what he says in the Song of Songs in chapter 2, once again. Like a lily among thorns. And he's using imagery once again from what she says. He doesn't say she's a prettier rose. He doesn't say she's a whole different type of species of flower. He's using the same imagery. He's saying, sure, you can look at yourself that way, but here's how you can also look at yourself, and here's how I see you. And so in your relationship, whether you're dating, whether you're married, whether you're even single, are you looking to restore somebody in this way? Like, let's say you're single. Are you looking for somebody that is willing to help you restore yourself or to restore the other person? Or you're dating somebody who's only willing to build themselves up, who's only willing to love themselves, who's only willing to care about themselves? And so as we continue on in this story, we can also see that there's not only a beautiful restoration of character, but there's also an openness, a characterization of this dating relationship. And the last thing I want us to see, that as they're moving on from the beginning of dating, right? So they're first, they're kind of talking to each other, but now they're like, okay, we're serious about the relationship. Like, we want to move on. The next step that the author wants to see is that there is confirmation in dating. Now that you have a vision of dating, now that you know, okay, in this relationship, here's what I must continually do in order to keep it up. What's kind of the last thing? What's kind of the last bit that I need to worry about? And so the last, in verse 9, not verse 9. It says in verse 16, right, as they're talking, she's saying, how handsome are you, my beloved? Chapter 1, verse 16. My beloved, how charming, and our bed is verdant. The beams of our house are cedars, our rafters are firs. And so as I'm reading through this again, I have no idea what it's talking about until I dive deeper, and I found out that apparently they're not, this is not premarital sex, but this is actually a picture of a picnic. And so in verse 17, he's saying the beams of our house. So this is a picture of a bunch of beams, I guess you can think of it as trees, bunch of trees around them, and rafters you can think of as a roof or firs. So these are nuts, these are different kinds of fruits that's growing. So they're actually, they're actually having a first date. And so now that they're having a first date, right, they're still talking in chapter 2, and then eventually it comes into verse 4 in chapter 2, where it says, let him lead me into the banquet hall, and let his banner over me be love. And so this is the last part of our study today, the confirmation of dating. Right? What the author is trying to point us to is from the perspective of the woman. She's saying, hey, bring me into this banquet hall. So a banquet hall in Israelite terms is just a dinner table, or a place to bring somebody in once you want to declare something. So this is not just a private dinner, but this is where you announce everything to the public. And so I think a clear imagery for this would be, it's like in Gen Z terms, we have a term called hard launch. And so hard launching means that you fully post the person onto your Instagram, your Facebook, your whatever feed online, and you're saying, hey, this is the person I'm willing to date. And so this is what they're doing. They're just announcing to the world and then to their community, hey, this is the person I'm trying to date. And moreover, this is an invitation for the rest of the community to bring into their relationship. And so as we're going through this, I want us to think, what are some areas in your life where you have the opportunity to bring your relationship into your community and have it checked? Because as we're going to go and we're going to see soon, there is some serious issues with their relationship that is going to pop up, and they're going to need the community. But for you, maybe it's because you guys are having some confusion. Maybe you're doubting. You're like, hey, is this person really right for me? Or you're like, okay, maybe is this person treating me the way I'm supposed to be treated? And so this is where the author is saying, hey, you two can date perfectly from point 1 to point 2, but if you don't have your community, You will have blind spots. There will be times where you want to learn how to date. There will be time where you could date somebody else better, but you wouldn't because you're blindsided by your own love for them, by not bringing them into the community. And so let's go ahead and finish off on chapter 2, starting in verse 5, where she says, this is from the perspective of the woman, and she says, "Strengthen me with raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am faint with love. His left arm is under my head, and his right arm embraces me." And so this is clearly a picture. They're cuddling, right? Like they're hugging each other, and they're embracing one another. And, if you're in a K-drama, you'll be screaming right now. And I think this is the same thing when we look at this passage. It's like, okay, why are they doing that? Like this is they've done everything perfectly. Like they got to know each other. He's a good guy. She's a hardworking girl, right? They brought into the community. They just ate together with all their community. But yet, what's happening here? And I think it's perfectly stated in verse 7, where the author and pretty much the character is making a fourth wall break, where she's saying, hold on a minute, I need to tell you something. And this is what she says: "Daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you by the gazelles and the does of the field, do not arouse or awaken love until it desires." All right? Here's the thing. As Christians, we're often, promoted to date. Like we're encouraged to date, we're encouraged to get married. But the thing is, nobody tells you that if you date perfectly, if you date everything right, you can still sin. And this is what the author is pointing to. The author is saying, if you do everything perfectly, you will still have the desire to want sex. And this is what exactly she's saying. She's saying, I charge you by the gazelles and the does of the field. And that's the imagery in Israel time for sexual, intimate, youthful love. Like this is deeply sexual connotations right here. And so she's saying, even though you're doing everything perfectly, even though you're doing everything by the book, there will always be a trap for sin in your life. And so, if you guys are interested in what that means, on why premarital sex is so bad, I invite you to come back next week. Okay? So where Pastor Roland will be talking about what does it mean to be what is the danger of love. And so as we're wrapping up, as we're continuing, I want us to see this part too. The book of Song of Songs is an awesome book. As I got to learn it, it's deeply enriched with imagery and things that you don't ever get to see for the rest of the Bible. But I think one of the reasons why this book is not often talked about is because a lot of us are hurting because of our relationships. Like a lot of us are dating, but we never found the right person. Like a lot of us who are trying to date somebody, but maybe that person rejects you. A lot of us who might be married to somebody who you don't feel like is the right person for you. And a lot of us are either divorced or going to be divorced, and you're just experiencing immense grief. And so the book doesn't talk about that. But thank God, this is not the only book in the Bible, right? And eventually, if you continue to read from the Old Testament into the New, you get to see that Jesus comes. And Jesus doesn't live out this book, at least not by every word of it, right? He never was married. He never dated anybody, at least to the best of my knowledge. Like the gospel doesn't record him trying to date anybody. But he loved perfectly. He dated perfectly. And what I mean by that is because from every single point in this book trying to make, right, the vision of dating, Jesus had the most perfect vision to date us. I know that sounds weird, but he wanted us to be his bride, the church to be his bride. And so he had that vision and he carried it out perfectly. And he wanted to restore us. So he went and encouraged us. He went and exhorted us. He taught us. He gave us the gospel. And that's how he was able to restore us. And then he publicly died on the cross so that he was able to save us. And so I pray that maybe some of you tonight are just experiencing grief. Some of you are even wanting to date. But I pray that this is both an encouragement and an opportunity for you to show love to Jesus, that when you get to date, right, and if you get to date, that you praise the Lord. But even if you don't, that you have the opportunity to still love Jesus and to show that, yeah, there is still opportunity for me to be a Christian and single. And so, as we're wrapping up, I just want to pray over us. And so, let us pray. Dear God, I thank you for the opportunity to hear your word today. As we're looking at the picture of dating, God, it's so unique. You call us to be strong, faithful servants. You call us to be people who absolutely adore you, and so you give us partners for life. God, I thank you for Esther, who is an awesome partner for me. And so I pray that as our church continues and we leave, that we still see the vision that you've given us, which is there is a long, long heaven waiting for us at the end of our life. Even though our marriage won, even though our dating relationship won, but our relationship with you, God, is ultimately forever. And so in your name I pray. Amen.